look at the astrological chart, that chart does not describe you at all. It describes the car you're driving. Isn't that amazing?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have this appropriate disassociation from that chart. It's the vehicle you step into. And I'm shocked with this. Most astrologers either don't know or don't teach. What I consider a major point is that astrological charts are inherited. And even Johannes Kepler saw this in the 16th century, way back when. And yeah, you got to do a whole bunch of charts to see this, but you realize, oh my God, these charts are inherited. You can even see what comes down the mother or the father side of the family in that natal chart. And that's an amazing thing to watch, because we understand what I call the three families, the short, chubby Italians, and they are chubby. They're lovely, though. They cook real good cooks. And then these 6'5" Swahilis and these equally small Asians, that's not a chubby one in that family. When they have babies, what type of babies do they have? Exactly like their biological structure, with hundreds of thousands of traits coming down the biological family line. But now we're talking about astrological patterns, the position of the sun, moon, and planets out there in space. That pattern comes down the family line. That's an astonishing thing to realize, because here astrology is validating quantum physics. Astrology is saying, oh my God, the universe is patterned energy, and that patterned energy comes down the family line. It's just a very amazing thing. So, the dilemma thing is real interesting. In Eastern teachings, in the Western teachings, we just have this duality thinking. And there's a lot of suffering with black and white thinking. You know, blame it on Aristotle. A thing is either black or white. A thing is yes or no. And really, does that work? Because legal attorney friend of mine here and a paralegal friend of mine here, and they know in the judicial system, really, you're guilty or innocent and nothing in between? When that judge rings down that hammer? I'm guessing that's not the case. I'm guessing that doesn't represent reality. But in that judicial system, which is duality, it's one or the other. You're going to be found totally guilty or totally innocent of that charge, dismissed or be fined for that charge. The dilemma is that opposition, black or white thinking. The Eastern teachings, which I've just a few tiny issues with, but the Eastern teachings are fantastic, great source of knowledge and wisdom and all that stuff. They use the tetralemma, which are the four aspects of the mind. And so people go, well, what is that? Well, in the Western world, and most people on the street, think a thing is either black or white. It's either yes or no, it's up or down. And it's that duality. But in the tetralemma taught by Nagarjuna, who many consider to be greater than Buddha himself, he was in the 2nd century AD, and created the path of the middle way, the Madhyamika path. A thing can be black, or it can be white. Or it can be black and white at the same time. And the intellect will go, I don't even get that. I can't even get, well, of course, the intellect is so limited. Why would it get it? But that's the third option, black or white at the same time. But my favorite is the last one. Neither black nor not white at the same time. And that fourth lemma actually describes the nature of the universe and Buddha's teaching. Because a lot of people don't realize, people would go to the Buddha and go, Buddha, do we have this eternal soul that reincarnates and go from lifetime to lifetime? This eternal spark, this little ball of light, this Atman that goes from lifetime to lifetime. And he said, it is not correct to say that you have an Atman that goes from lifetime to lifetime. And it is also not correct to say you do not. That's my answer. And people are like, what? Because they're not even asking the right question. They're so out of the conceptual framework, they don't even understand what's going on. And that's the split-slit test in quantum physics, which some of you may know, where is a photon a solid particle or a wave of energy? It exhibits both properties when it's just floating around in space. It can be a wave of energy or a solid particle. And it only collapses into a solid particle when you look at it. And they've done this test over and over and over. So this would be like, neither a particle nor not a particle, neither a wave nor not a wave is the correct answer. This superpositioning, this simultaneous arising, that's why the universe is so great, it's so weird. Now, having this idea that there's no good or no bad, and the professor is really strong in this, he goes, it's not that you're wrong, I'm not calling you wrong, he said, but this just calls, he said, for correction. Because the understanding of the Tao the Westerners have and that you have is not correct. And he goes, it's not about if you're right or wrong, there's a more correct understanding. And this is what we have to look at in terms of life and all this. We don't want to criticize, condemn life. Life calls for correction, not condemnation and criticism, okay? And people live in all states. Now, in this dilemma approach, if we approach the world from just a dualistic thinking, they're right or totally wrong. Republicans are right, Democrats are wrong, Democrats are right, Republicans are wrong. That's not how the universe is set up, and that will not work for you. And we use the Yang approach to fight the Yang, by the way. The correction process, we'll talk about later, is what we should do. And that's why attitude is everything. Now, people know I love to bring metaphysics into astrology, of course, because what does the chart show? It shows the person's instinctive way in the human form, how they think and feel and speak and act. And we know all the powers in this thinking and feeling. Tremendous amount of power. So, of course, you bring in metaphysical teachings in because thoughts become things, right? And we have this wonderful LOA that's around the law of attraction, right? So trendy, so popular, which is really the law of attention because energy flows where attention goes. That's how that really works. And that's why I attached to the astrological model, because it shows every person has a natural tendency and style to think in a style and manner. All you got to do is find a person with tons of fire in the chart versus tons of air, tons of water, and you'll see that difference immediately. So, we'll come back to that law of attraction, but let's look at 2016 to 2024. Because y'all are out there hip on this quantum stuff and all this, but seriously, we want to get away. You don't have to do anything, but we want to get away from this 5-sensory material mechanical view of cause and effect and forces operating. But it's not wrong to describe the universe in that way, like I'm going to pour energy into this person, and you pour energy in the person, they seem to change and all this. That's actually not what's really happening while you do that. And it's so incredibly interesting, the nature of the universe, because the solid matter seems so evident, it seems so solid, it seems so noticeable. But when you even look at this table here, you say, well, what's it made of? Really hard atoms, trillions of them, a whole bunch of them, just crammed in together, it's so hard. Do you know that an atom is 99.99999999999999996% empty space? It's literally not there. So, well, what gives an atom solidity or this seeming heaviness? It's really a field of energy. And you think you're sitting on these chairs, touching these chairs. You are actually not. All atoms, these fields of energy, repel each other to give this illusion of solidity. You're not actually touching those chairs. You are 1/100,000,000th of a centimeter above them. You're actually not in, no one's in contact with the chairs they're sitting in. You're actually floating above them. It's not a big space, but it's a space. 1/100,000,000th of a centimeter above that chair. Isn't that amazing? So the universe is more than we perceive through our 5 senses. And everyone here is so brilliant. They understand this. So let's look at these transits, these cycles from 2016 to 2024. And it wasn't that long ago I was here, and this is amazing because I thought, man, this is just like a continuation of that last talk. But we want to understand something when viewing these cycles in astrology, where the planets continue to move. Astrology is archetypally descriptive and archetypally predictive. Now, what does that mean? You can put the word symbol there if you want. It's symbolically descriptive and symbolically predictive. We are participative co-creators in our universe, and we're just not a machine running. And the more you identify, even with the physical form in the mind, this car you're driving, this human car you're driving, the more mechanically you think, the more limited your life expression is. We are not victims of the world around us, but co-creators. And yes, there are patterns of energy that rise. At certain times, energies become active, then they recede. Then they become active, then they recede. But just like the genetic code and epigenetics, right? They thought, oh, you're just a program, here's your genetic code, you're going to do this, you're going to have this disease. And they found, no, it doesn't even work that way at all. What they call it, genetic expression. It depends on what and how much of that genetic code is turned on or off. It's totally turned on, turned offable to the maximum. People don't know, we got this genetic pattern, we're going to look exactly like that. No, that's not how the genes work at all. Because when they discovered there were way too few of them to do all these varieties, they realized, oh my God, these genes turn on and off all the time. Just like high fructose corn syrup, which no one should be eating, found goes right to the brain and infects the genes there that produce all these health issues. Yeah, it's not such a good thing. Real sugar is far better. So, when we go through life on these transits, we have to realize that we play a part in them. Just like in the natal chart, you're looking at this chart, is this due to criminal or is this due to police officer? What choices is he going to make in life and where's he going to go? My favorite is the criminal police officer, because you can be talking about him at the same time. Okay? Carl Jung said, what we are unconscious of appears in our life as destiny. This is really brilliant. Because if you're not aware, if you're not it's not me, it just, that's the way it is, it just happens to me, it's part of my karma, it's not me at all, it's just not me, not me. Yes, it is you entirely. Total freedom requires total responsibility. If you want to be totally free, you have to assume total responsibility for everything that shows up in your life. But you don't pick on yourself or blame yourself for what shows up, because you realize that we are mostly unconscious most of the time. In 2015, scientists discovered that we barely have 5% of a conscious mind. Far less than anyone thought. A lot of things that we thought were volitional and conscious activity turned out to be unconscious behavior, and they could monitor them up to 8 seconds before it appeared in the person's thing. I'm making a conscious choice, I'm going to select this one over here. They could detect that 8 seconds even before the person was aware they were going to choose to pick that. And that's because the human body has layers of neurons, and we're on this automatic behavior. So how these transits work, in my opinion, the analogy I like to use is like a boat on a lake. So you have this large lake, and here's a boat here, and you want to get to the other side. Well, the astrological transits are like the wind. We're here, we want to go over there. If the wind starts blowing from the south and starts blowing to the north where we want to go, that's fantastic. All we got to do is put up a sail, and there we go. We don't have to row or nothing. Even if the wind is blowing south strongly, if anyone knows how to sail, you can cut back and forth. You can literally sail a boat into the wind. You just cut it at a 45-degree angle and just zigzag and can go north in a southbound wind. If there's no wind at all, you just get the oars and you start rowing and you get across. And if you want to even go faster when that north wind is blowing with yourself, you can row with it too. So the astrological transits are the movement of energies. And just like in the original natal chart, where the person has the option to be a criminal or a police officer or a drug addict or a spiritual meditator, transits are the same way. We have the choice of how we're going to use that active energy pattern. We're so caught up, this, yang, the masculine, yin, the feminine. Someone should do a bumper sticker, yin is in, by the way. We're so much on the yang side of life, the left brain analytical male versus the intuitive feminine right brain, so to speak. We don't realize how much we're in this yang perspective. Even in astrology, the approach to astrology is, I must know the future and I must get this data so I can control it. That's a pure yang approach. A more yin approach is that archetypes can show us more than we know as they unfold. That's why a yin approach is more about process than controlling. We're really asleep on this yang side. So, 2016 to 2024, there are two main repeating astrological historical cycles that are occurring at this time. So I love to do it real simple and then explain the complexity. Yuppies and fascism. There you go. Yeah, my Nazi friends over here. And these are primarily from the cycles of Uranus and Pluto. So we actually don't do too much astrology, but the planet Uranus is that planet, the archetype of freedom and independence. It's that hippie, don't tell me what to do. It's that avant-garde, non-conformist, oppositional energy. How you define Uranus is like, Uranus says, well, those may be your rules, but they're not mine, so you can just shove them up your anus. That's how you remember Uranus. Don't tell me what to do. Pluto, just the plutonium bomb, is the most concentrated point of transformational energy in the chart. It's extremely intense. And it is the planet of transformation through elimination, all this tremendous change, but its function, I feel, is it's so strong and intensified, okay? So planets come together and play around the chart, and about on average, 127 years, Uranus and Pluto come together. So we have this all-incredible power and this bohemian energy come together. So this overwhelming, rebellious, and breakout, break-free energy. Last time was the 60s. Hippies. Yeah. Up yours. Previous to that, it was the 1850s. But these two planets come together, and because Uranus moves faster than Pluto, it moves out and forms the 90-degree angle back to Pluto. That's what they call the waxing square. It's the first 90-degree angle. Then it'll form an opposition, and then it'll form a backwards 90-degree angle. Then they come back together. So the cycle from 1850s is tied into the 60s, and the next one in the I've actually looked it up. 2104, I have it right there. Way down the line, which we're not going to be around for that one in this physical form, unless someone discovers some massive antioxidant. Okay. So how does this work? Because all these cycles have their segmented things. It's like the new moon, full moon aspect. The sun and the moon run together, the new moon, then we have that first quarter moon, then you got the full moon, where the moon is way over here, the sun's over here, and then you have the last quarter moon, and then the new moon again. And these cycles are all tied together because I want to read something. This is quite amazing from one of my favorite little astrologers, Dane Rudhyar. So brilliant. He was actually paid by the number of words he wrote, so people complain his writings just went on forever. Because if you're paid by the word, just like, yes, I'm going to say in 1,000 words what 25 could do. Right? He had written this prior to the 1960s, and it's so relevant for today, which is why I want to read this. And this is quoting Dane Rudyard. When Uranus is conjunct Pluto, which means they come together, a new cycle in the relationship between the human factors, which these two planets symbolize, begins. The cycle now ending, he's talking about coming up to the 60s, began in 1850s. That's when the last one was. And there was a feminist revolution. All the original feminist books came out in the 1850s, like the sexual revolution again in the 60s, okay? At the time, 1850, when the spread of the Industrial Revolution began to affect directly and indirectly through colonialism the whole of humanity. And what's interesting, there's always this technological revolution with Uranus and Pluto, because Uranus represents the high technology too, which we had in the 60s, and recently at the square, and back in the 1850s. And you think, well, that's great, all this technology is so beneficial for people, I'm sure people's life standards improved. They went down for 20 to 30 years. The standard of living decreased after 1850 because the industrialists took all the money. Loss of living standards for like 20 to 30 years, back to Dane Rudyard. Pluto was not discovered yet, which is true. Pluto was discovered in the 30s, and when an outer planet, transformational planet is discovered, the archetype it represents is released into the collective consciousness. That's very important to remember. So that the factors in man, which Pluto represents, have not yet emerged into man's. I love that because it's like we say men and women now. Not the women here, because even back then before the 60s, no, it was man. It was a man thing. Just a man. Apparently women weren't kosher yet. Into everybody's collective consciousness. These factors in our modern world transformed by their very technology which enabled us to discover the planet Pluto. Referring to the progressive planetarization of mankind to whatever seeks to unite men and women in terms of the most basic common denominator, in terms of the most elementary common humanity, paid by the word. Here's a brilliant paragraph. Unless a nuclear total war almost completely disrupts human evolution, there seems to be no doubt that a global or planetary society encompassing all human beings will take shape next century. Where we are right now. He was saying this before the 60s. And it is. Look what's going on, right? Such a society is already a fact. Now remember, this was pre-60s. At the level of world communication, industry, and indeed of international politics. However, the Jupiterian, Saturnian traditions, those are the two social planets, of our still surviving separate and proudly individualistic cultures and nations are stubbornly resisting these changes, which Uranus brought to us all the way back from the 18th century when it was discovered. Okay? What is happening today as Uranus, this is Dane Rudyard talking, as Uranus starts its new cycle of relation with Pluto, is that the very foundation of man's and women's collective mentality are being transformed. For Pluto represents indeed the planetary aspect of mind, the one mind of all humans. Many psychological or parapsychological mysteries would be explained if one really understood there is but one mind. Remember, this was pre-60s. That humanity is at the mental and heart level, one vast organized system. Well, we're way ahead of the curve on this, okay? This cycle of the 60s came to its first testing from about 2012 to 2015, even plus or minus several years on that side. It was a mini hippie revolution, as I call it. We had the full hippie revolution in the 60s, and then around 2012, 2015, the mini hippie revolution. It was the first waxing square, the first tension where you have this little object and it's like, well, let's throw it on the road and see what it does. So this was like a testing time for the revolution of the 60s, okay? Now, Dane Rudyard called these quarter moon phases crisis times, and they are crisis times because you have the original idea, oh, what a wonderful concept, let's evolve and expand and grow better and expand the universe. Really? Well, put the tire on the road and show me. Surprisingly, not as easy as one might think, right? So at that time, and the Chinese have that ideogram which combines crisis and opportunity in one word, and this is exactly what this is at those quarter turns. So we saw a large push forward of movement in the culture and society, and I'm talking recently, up to 2016. We had 2 terms of the Obama administration, more feminism, more rights for the races, the disabled, equality of sexes, marijuana in Colorado, all types of stuff. It's like, boy, we're just pushing forward. And I love the fact there was a semi-famous astrologer, I'm going to be so kind and not get the person's name here, who was talking about this 2012 to 2015 time. And this person, she was not wrong, but she said in 2012 to 2015 with the Uranus-Pluto square, and she talked about this almost a decade before, we will finally see the end of petrol and oil and the combustion engine